6:32, so we'll go ahead and get started. And welcome everyone who is on the call. The Maricopa County Branch of the NAACP welcomes you this morning. And we are going to the Maricopa Community College. College. I'm on the college campus right now. Let me shift hats. I'm at South Mountain, Paul, right now, South Mountain Community College. Maricopa County NAACP welcomes you, okay? And we are going to continue our recognition of the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. And I would like to call your attention to our little button there. You see it says Maricopa County Branch NAACP. And I also have one on my lapel. If you would like one, let us know, because our slogan is protect the vote, never gonna give it up. So all of you on the call know that we are past the midterms, but the Maricopa County Branch NAACP, we are now focusing on 2024. So, you know, we're going to protect the vote. We're going to do all we can because we're never going to give it up. All right. So, like I said, this morning, we want to do, we call these our critical conversations. And again, thank you for joining us. We have two guests with us today, Mr. Paul Harasha, who is a sociologist and a longtime friend and colleague, and attorney Kesha Hodge Washington, who is with us. And we were going to engage with their opinions on our topic of the beloved community. Dr. Martin Luther King talked about the beloved community. And also our facilitator is going to be our second vice president, who is Dr. Camilla Westenberg, faculty emeritus from Phoenix College. Let me start, but I just want to say that I recently read part of Dr. Martin Luther King's letter from the Birmingham jail. And in one of the segments, he talks about time. It was a response to several, from my understanding, several ministers had written to Dr. King and was encouraging him to slow down his quest for equality and justice, even though he was doing it in a nonviolent way. And my understanding is his letter from the Birmingham jail was his response to his ministerial colleagues. And the part that I was just going to paraphrase and introduce to the group is that this one section, he talks about time and how he says time is neutral. Time is neutral, and it's upon us to decide what we want to do with time. And he further goes ahead and says that in his opinion, the people who are wanting to do evil in this situation, I insert those folks who are trying to take away rights, all types of rights, as well as the voter suppression that's going on. Those are the folks he's talking about, who he says, like I said, I'm paraphrasing, they are using their time. They are using their time judiciously. Well, not necessarily judiciously, but they are using their time for what I think he would call evil or not good. And then he goes on further to say that at the, later on when we reflect back, perhaps the people, the most appalling, I think he uses the word appalling, the most appalling scenario will be those folks who were silent, who stood back and did nothing and did not use the time for good. So that's one thought that we want to just keep on your mind about how are we individually using time to work for the good of the beloved community. Okay. And then let me just ask my colleague Paul to take a few minutes, introduce yourself, Paul, 30 seconds. Then Attorney Hodge, Washington, if you will introduce yourself. And following that, Dr. Westenberg, if you will start our discussion. And then we will reserve time for questions or dialogue from our participants as well. So Paul, Attorney Hodge, and then Dr. Westenberg.
Wonderful. Good morning, everyone. How is my audio? Can you hear me okay, Karen?
I can hear you well.
Wonderful. Dr. Harden, thank you for inviting me. It's really it's an honor and a privilege to be here and to collaborate with you. I see some names on this call that I recognize. Anyway, my name is Paul Harasha. I've been a sociology faculty at Mesa Community College for probably 20 years now. Been active in diversity, equity, inclusion issues on campus and in the community for that time. Before that, which really set me on the path of doing some of this work, I worked for the city of Phoenix in the Equal Opportunity Department. I worked for Phoenix OIC with Jean Blue back in the 90s, which really opened my eyes to some things. I wear a couple of hats too. Discussion today will be from a sociological lens. Also a member of the Baha'i community, Tempe Baha'i Faith, which hopefully will share some perspectives in a sociological or spiritual lens on this discussion. So thanks again, Dr. Harden. I really appreciate the opportunity and welcome and good morning, everyone.
Okay, great. Attorney Hodge.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Thank you again, Dr. Harden, for the invitation. Great to see you, Paul, and thank you, Camila, for facilitating today's discussion. I'm Kesha Hodge, Washington. I'm an attorney by trade. I'm also a resident of Phoenix. I've been in Phoenix for more than 20 years, more than half of my life. My focus tonight, this afternoon, is going to be primarily from a legal background. I started off my career as a judicial clerk for the Court of Appeals for Cecil B. Patterson, who was the first African-American judge on that bench. I transitioned, then I became Assistant Attorney General, and I'm currently in the role of a civil and commercial litigator, which simply means I deal with lawsuits that are filed in a non-criminal case. From a leadership perspective, I'm also a past president of the Hazel B. Daniels, which is now known as the Arizona Black Bar. The American Bar Association serves as vice chair. I'm currently the president of the Phoenix Metropolitan Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and I'm also a candidate for Phoenix City Council. I truly believe that social justice changes can be made through the law and the policies that are implemented. My personal philosophy is everyone has the ability to be a potential to be a change agent, and I believe in using our skill sets to help others. So, like I said, my conversation today will primarily be focused from a law perspective. So, thank you again for this opportunity.
Dr. Westenberg. You're unmute yourself, Dr. Westenberg. And Paul, I didn't know you worked at Arizona OIC. I worked there too for a while, so we have to talk about that as well.
For sure.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. I almost want to say good afternoon because I'm in New Jersey, but good morning. Thank you so very much for being here. What I'm going to do is give you a definition of beloved community and a couple of choice words for beloved and for community as well. Beloved community, a community in which everyone is cared for, absent of poverty, hunger, and hate. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. popularized the term during his lifetime of activism and imbued it with new meaning, fueled by his faith that such a community was in fact possible. But he always acknowledged that realizing his vision would involve systems of law, education, infrastructure, healthcare, and municipal reform. No one sector, much less one person, could create it in its isolation. That's G. Theta Achieving Dr. King's Beloved Community, January 18th, 2019. I took the liberty to look up the word beloved and pulled a few choice words. Dearest, precious, adored, favorite, treasured, prized, esteemed, worshipped, liked, valued, revered, exalted. And then when we think in terms of community, we have various communities within the home, within your church, within your organizations, with close friends, and the larger human community where we look at the political environment and social environment in which we live, the educational environment. It goes on and on. It's very diverse. And so we're coming together as a community from varying viewpoints and varying ways of knowing community. And so I will begin with all of that with the first question. From your, and Kesha, I will ask you to answer first, and then Paul. Okay. The question is, from your individual point of view, what does Dr. King Jr.'s description of the beloved community mean to you?
To me, I think it's recognizing the individual worth and importance of every human being and treating them as you would your brother or sister when it comes to the basics of human existence, like the provision of food, provision of general services, and then just the conveyance of respect. I think it's definitely was shaped by his influence as a pastor, kind of akin to the Good Samaritan, where we saw poverty, lower class, where we saw hunger. There was a guy in need of basics, the food. And we also saw instances of hate. The Good Samaritan talks about the Samaritan do-gooder and the Jewish traveler at that time. They were not necessarily, historically context, they were not friends. So that's how I see it. And actually, I'll say this, I think it's interesting because the parable came as a response to a question from a lawyer trying to figure out the technicalities of who is my neighbor. And I think like Jesus, Martin Luther King was trying to convey that the neighbor or the beloved community is one that shows mercy and love to their fellow mankind in all aspects of community. So that's what I think from my perspective, what he was trying to convey, what our desired goal as a community. And I'll steal one of your words when you described beloved, you talked about prize, like that should be the goal that we're striving to, that should be the prize that we're trying to attain, a society or a community where individuals are all treated truly equally, regardless of socioeconomic class, regardless of their, regardless of who they are. So that's my perspective.
Thank you. Paul?
Wonderful, Kesha. Wonderful opening, Dr. Westenberg, too. That quote is beautiful. Most of you probably know Dr. Martin Luther King has his advanced degrees in theology, but his undergraduate degree is in sociology, which was beautiful. See, he recognizes systems and community. And today, a very strong narrative in this society is individualism. And it's like individualism on steroids. I can do what I want, when I want. You do you, I do me. And that's only getting us into serious trouble. When I hear that discussion, I just recognize people haven't had good sociology classes or sociological discussions and understanding how systems are interrelated. And from a spiritual lens too, and the Baha'i writings compare society in all its parts and communities and institutions compared to the human body, and how the human body has to work together, and each part and each organ has to work together in harmony and unity for the body to be healthy. And as some of us, me included, get a little older, we get some ailments and illnesses, and you see how they impact all of our rest of our body. It's kind of like when we have extreme stratification and inequality and poverty, some people have the luxury to kind of ignore it and move away from it, and not to hate on anybody where people live and where they do, where they live in gated communities and this kind of escape, but eventually the entire human body will suffer from other people's suffering until we recognize our interconnectedness and mutuality, will we be able to heal? And I think that's what I think about when I think of a beloved community. It's like really, like Kesha said, it's all of us as individuals, but giving human dignity and to each other and just recognizing that mutuality. So I think we're diseased and we're looking for remedies. And I think these discussions will help us get there.
Thank you so much. Kesha, your concept of was very good. The words that you pulled prized. I think if everyone has the opportunity to be acknowledged, perhaps that would allow us to do better. And Paul, your analogy of the body working together is a wonderful concept. As I approach 75 years old, it resonates with me. And I wonder if people heard that concept a bit more. Perhaps it would resonate with them as well. So thank both of you so much for your responses to that. The next question is related to Dr. King's concept of systems of law and municipal reform. How advanced do you think we are in Maricopa County in achieving the beloved community? And what recommendations do you have for change or improvements? Paul, I will ask you that first.
I was hoping Kesha would go first on this, but no, I'm kidding.
It was ironic that
No.
you got that it worked out that way, actually.
Maricopa County in some ways is very unique compared to parts of the country. Everybody's from somewhere else and a lot very new and things like that. But on another level, our communities across this country and across the world are very similar, And I think, kind of blending, Dr. King's theology and spirituality and my sociology and maybe a spiritual lens too. I think we have to get better at having this harmony between faith and reason, spirituality and science, where we can have this conversation in harmony where, sometimes if you just have faith without knowledge, it's kind of can be very naive, and you think just maybe magic dust will cure things and good intentions, and I love everybody but just faith maybe doesn't give you the tools to diagnose what's going on in our world and understand the challenges and the inequalities and disparities. But the flip side, as a sociologist too, just having knowledge of how deep our stratification can be and is, and some of the issues challenging us, just knowledge, I think leads to a lot of cynicism and a lot of paralysis, like maybe don't know what to do. So I think maybe the example of Dr. King blending faith and knowledge, and as we advance, we can use the two to keep our feet on the ground in reality to address these issues, but also find some spiritual insights from our world religions. And for Baha'i, it's Baha'u'llah, and for others, it's Christ in the New Testament and the Bhagavad Gita and the Quran. If we can use those spiritual insights along with the social sciences and academics to address these issues, I think that shows a mature society. And I think we're, in some places you see it, but most of the places we're kind of lacking one or the other and kind of in conflict, and we're seeking that harmony. And I don't think that's unique to Maricopa County. I think that's our world in general.
Thank you very much, Kesha.
Yeah, I'll chime in and say this. I did like Paul's analogy regarding the body, and I kind of view it the same way. The community, to me, I see what is the greatest failing on, one of the greatest failings on our achieving the beloved community, the goal of that is our growing population of marginalized community. And one that I think that is growing that is not getting the attention or the true emergency that it is our growing unsheltered population, our homelessness. I think that is one area I think I think as Maricopa County, we need to do a better job of. The last statistic I saw said the poverty rate in Maricopa County was 11.2%. And I have no statistical data to confirm, but I think it's fair to presume that that has actually risen in 2022, given the overall rise in inflation and the cost of basic goods. And the reason I say that is because that is showing that if you look at the body analogy, I think that's saying like 12% of our body is not in good health. Like, and how do we change that? And I agree with Paul, like faith and theory and theology, all of that is good, but I think we have to transition toward actions and actual having and goals. And I think we do that by focusing on the value, the individual value of each individual. I think we not only look at individuals as I personally say that the more we call somebody a homeless person or somebody, but instead of calling them John or Marie or that such and such son and such daughter, we kind of move away from seeing the individual value of everyone. And I believe that there is a lot of systematic and social barriers that are creating a greater divide, especially in that population. And I think we need to be intentional in our response to that. I mean, when we're dealing with our rise in rents, we're dealing with the unemployment, we're dealing with poverty, we're dealing with domestic violence, legal problems, like drug abuse, substance abuse, all of those things need to be intentionally addressed in order to move us towards this beloved community that is where everyone has the same level of respect. They have the same level of basic food. They have the basic level of basic provisions that I believe that all individuals should have here in this country specifically. So I think there are things that can be done. I personally, I'm gonna go from my sidetrack real quick on my little detour, but I believe that homelessness right now in our city is, especially in our county, is an emergency and it should be treated as such. I think the longer we as society wait in order to address that issue, the harder and more difficult it will be to fix. And at the same time, we are, more importantly, the human capital, the individuals that we will lose in the interim is a loss, not just for them individually, but loss for society as a whole, because each individual brings value. So that's my long-winded answer to your question.
Thank you both so very much. Kesha, I understand your sympathy. I don't even want to use the word sympathy. Your concern for the degree of homelessness in the community is something that I share too. And in Phoenix, I'm amazed at the amount that I see, and yet the amount of buildings and apartments and how metropolitan Phoenix is growing, and yet the homelessness is growing as well. And so I concur. I think that it is a dire situation. It's something that we need to address. And Paul, I'll tell you, what you shared about health and science and religion and pulling all of those concepts together to work in unison, that's a tall task. I said that just because I'm in a personal situation. I go a lot on faith, but I'm having to rely on science for the outcome. And I'm sort of mediocre with religion. So to put all of those things together, it's very, very difficult. And then when you talk about our city, our state, our country, and our world, and to have all of the individuals at their various ways of knowing, that's a monumental task. So thank you so very much, both. Just wonderful, wonderful thoughts about this. Looking at the third question, referring to the idea that no one sector, much less one person, could create it, the beloved community, in isolation. What recommendations do you have for the community? Up for grabs. on this one?
I can go if you like, Paul, since I'm already unmuted.
Okay.
For me, it means collaboration. I think we have a lot of organizations that are out here and entities and individuals that are doing good and making changes. But I think it's a tribute to why collaboration is best. I believe when our resources are siloed, we run the risk of not as effective. For a bigger impact, I think we need to further collaborate. And I believe it, especially in dealing, and I'm probably going to stick on the homeless situation for a second, but I believe it requires a multifaceted response. I believe that it requires partnerships from our corporate partners. It requires the social services from our community organizations, such as our churches and the nonprofits. And I also believe that it requires an interplay with our municipality and our governments and ensuring that the policies that are being set by the government are cognizant of the type of the solution that we want. It's ensuring that we have, and it's also the other thing I want to talk about, it also ensures that all voices have an advocate. So the population that normally needs our help normally does not have a voice. If we look at historical context, we normally have where the disenfranchised, they don't have the resources to hire an attorney or to hire a lobbyist or to hire individuals to speak for them. So we need to ensure that in any process that those that are effective have a voice. So that's kind of how I view it, that no one person could create the beloved community. It requires, like the word says, it's community. It requires all of these components coming together, ensuring that we have a common goal and we ensure that each segment or stakeholder in the community has a plan to work towards that stated goal. So,
Thank you.
Paul, I'll let you go.
Thank you, Kesha. I'll just build a little bit on Kesha's idea about collaboration, but maybe just step back just a little bit to the idea that not one person or not one sector can create this beloved community. In my sociology classes, I talk to the students about social movements and social change, and a lot of our young people and people in general are kind of sometimes waiting on a leader to emerge and who's this savior, and it doesn't work that way. And sometimes our stories are told inaccurately or not fully. And I'll try to touch upon the Rosa Parks story. We learned the story about Rosa Parks as she kind of got tired one day and just sat at the front of the bus and just said, I can't take it anymore. And she was but in reality, there was lots of months and months of planning and people behind the scenes organizing and students and people helping with rides to do the bus boycott. It wasn't just a one-day thing where Rosa Parks, and this is not to demean her station in history in the civil rights movement by any means, it's actually to elevate everybody's role. There's a lot of people sacrifice their time and energy for that movement. And if we tell the story just as one person, then I think the rest of us kind of just sit and wait for that person to arise. And that's not the way change happens. And then the part about collaboration is so true. We unfortunately kind of get insular in our groups, in our areas, whatever it is, our religious groups, our neighborhood groups, and definitely our racial groups. We might get a little insular, and then we aren't able to collaborate across these lines that is needed. Other things that I think about, maybe a little bit, maybe not, but provocative too, but to make these changes is we can't prioritize the comfort of the privilege in these conversations. Sometimes we want to make people feel comfortable, and when we talk about these issues that Kesha's bringing up, and homelessness and that we can't. We have to speak truth, and we have to act in defense of the oppressed. And how we do that is everybody, but sometimes we don't want to have those discussions because we don't want to make people feel uncomfortable. And I think that's healthy by any means. And the other thing is prioritizing. I know we say this a lot, but I don't know if we really practice it. Prioritizing diversity and appreciating it rather than just prioritizing assimilation. Like it's really hard to have these conversations virtual, where I really want to get like just real. And you all don't know me and that well, and going through the lens or through the camera, it's a little bit different. But like this idea of a lot of times dominant group will accept marginalized groups if they speak like them, worship like them, wear their hair like them, light skinned like them, have names like them. And that's not true. That's not truly, so the dominant group has to go the other way just as much, if not more so, of valuing, appreciating diversity. So I don't know if that makes sense, but I think about really making sacrifice on both sides, but people in privilege and luxury have to really step up to it. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Wow. Thank both of you. You took me down so many roads there with that. When you were talking about collaboration, yes, I agree. We have such strength, and we're all doing wonderful, wonderful jobs in our little isolated worlds, where it's really going to need a strong force to come together, and it's going to need to be very intentional and strategic with what we do, which brings me to the vote with where we are when you say, Kesha, that some people don't have a voice, and how do we design the world or reshape the world so that everyone does have a voice? And so maybe today we can arrive at that. And Paul, when you were speaking and you were talking about Rosa Parks and people not knowing about the background to that journey, I think so much it brought me to critical race theory, where people don't know, and we're working on them still not knowing it and taking it away. So we have some tall things to deal with in an environment which is progressively moving in the other direction. We'll get to the Q&A a little bit later. But yeah, that just took me with both of your responses down a number of roads. I thank you so very much for your responses to that. The fourth and the last question, and then we will go into Q&A, is given the results of our local midterm elections, this is locally and nationally, what are suggestions for reconciliation between the two parties? How can we reduce polarization that has been witnessed in the last 4 to 6 years in the country? And again, that's up for grabs.
I'll go first, Kesha. Yeah, great questions, and thank you, Camila. Some really, basic things that we still need to recognize is seeing the humanity in others. And one of the ways we don't do that, it's kind of all related. We can go down a lot of different paths, as you said, but I think about just cross-political, cross-racial, intergenerational, interfaith collaboration and communication. And then when you sit down and break bread with other people, and to be honest, if you serve with others, if you serve others with people different than you, lots of boundaries can be broken. So we have to develop some things where we really can serve others in different places across these racial lines. I think what hasn't been mentioned in this few minutes is really listening to the youth too. I'm just privileged to be able to be in a classroom with 20-year-olds every day. They're dealing with social media and their families and issues like that, but they also have lots of ideas that we need to listen to. And then maybe the last thing I'll say, it may not answer this question perfectly, because this is more about political parties, and I think we have to elevate our conversations and our public discourse above this partisan politics, and which is really challenging with the media and all that, but just really elevate it to where we're really truly recognizing our oneness and unity as human beings, which is easier said than done. And then the last thing I'll say on this one is, and it's actually connected to a quote I found looking at this that I hadn't seen before. Dr. King had said about a beloved community. He says it will require a qualitative change in our souls as well as a quantitative change in our lives. And I was thinking about that from a white perspective, and in the Baha'i writings in the early 1900s, the son of Baha'u'llah, the prophet of the Baha'i faith, he said that the average white, he said this in the middle of Jim Crow laws. He came to this country. He said the average white American has to have a revolutionary change in its attitude and concept of his Black brothers and sisters. Not just like a reform and not a little tweak, but just like a revolutionary. What that means and what that looks like, we're all trying to figure it out. But I think it has to do with things about how we educate our children, where we send our kids to school, who we have over for dinner. And I think if we can break that division or racial unity can lead to political unity and those types of things. But at the end of the day, I think our communities and our families have to work diligently, deliberately, innovatively, courageously to overcome this division and polarization in this country. And just to use your word, Dr. Westenberg, there's momentous tasks and efforts need to happen. But kind of went around in circles on that one, but I'll stop there. I'll turn it over to Kesha.
No, I get where you're going. If I had to make a suggestion on how we can bring the two parties together, I think it's focusing on the underlying problems that are facing our country. It's going back to the individual, seeing the humanity in each one of us. And I think it requires us to going back to the core of a good problem solving, even if it's like in math or in anything. You focus on the problem, like figure out what the root cause is and not be focused on casting blame. I think we need to go back to more respectful communication, focusing on our shared end goal. I think the two parties, can agree that we pretty much identify what the problems are. And I think maybe I'm being too Pollyanna-ish, but I do believe that we want the same shared end goal. And I think we need to be open to the methods of addressing. And we also need to realize that one person or one factor is a systematic issue, didn't create the problems that we have here. So we can't expect one party or one factor or one person, to create the solution, the end all be all solution. I think it definitely, again, it goes back to this collaborative response and hearing feedback from all individuals on how to do that. And the other thing that I think we need to focus on is we can't let the desire to be perfect deter us from trying. And everyone can always find criticism in the solutions that are being offered, but to the one or two, even if I'm of the philosophy, if a solution helps 50% of the population, to that 50%, that means the world. And I think we need to be more focused on the individuals that are benefited by our problem solving, our coming together. And I think we need to remind our representatives that they represent all of the people, not just the people that voted for them or the people that supported them, but their goal I grew up where my father and my grandfather would always say this. They felt like their role for raising us was to make sure that each generation was left better than the one that they came. And I think if our leaders and those that are making policies feel that way as well, we will definitely start moving in a positive trajectory. It's not about maintaining power. It's about making sure that the generation that follows them or the individuals that follow them, they can say they've left the world a better place. And I think if we start going back to that type of ideology, I think both parties can definitely, we can make more progress than we have seen in the last 4 to 6 years. So it may seem Pollyannish to some people, but I believe if we go back to just the general core of human being and human dignity and respect for each other, or the concept of the beloved community that everyone has this feeling, and we're moving towards those types of goals, I think we'll be better off than we are right now. So.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We've had some wonderful, wonderful responses. We have about 30 more minutes. Well, actually, not quite that much. And I do want to have ample time for the listeners, the other participants to join in and share thoughts and ask questions. And so at this particular juncture, I'm going to open the door for comments or questions from individuals of who have been really excited, and that isn't the word that I want to use, but engaged by some comment that has been made and you want to expound on it further, please do. And so I'm waiting for, as you say in the classroom, a show of hands to let me know who, and if you would like to show your faces, please do.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Dr. Harden.
I very much like thank you both panelists, very, very thought-provoking comments. And I wanted to ask everybody, anyone on the call who wants to respond, is like this idea of leaving it a better place than we have right now. What are we going to leave for the future, right? But how do we get back to everybody operating, accepting facts and truth, right? That's okay. I don't know how to succinctly ask this, but we talk about polarization, right? And the newscasters, they'll say we're polarized. But when do we accept the truth, right? First, you got to identify problem solving. I think Ms. Kesha, you said that. And until you really say what the problem is, we can't solve it. What do we do about, is it really polarization, or is it some groups who don't want to tell the truth or don't want to say that's the truth? I agree that we have to come back to compromising, and I agree that in this country we have to get away from the individualism, and we have to work toward collective good, and we have to work toward trying to leave the place better than it was when we were here. But if we have elected officials who won't even be honest and truthful, how do we get to that place where first they will say, yes, what I saw on the film is true, and yet, how do we get to seek truth? We have to seek the truth before we can move to reconciliation, right? How do we do that? That's a question for any and everybody. How do we get the folks who are denying facts to cooperate or compromise?
I remember when I heard the term first used, alternate fact. I remember when the press secretary came out and said, this is an alternate fact. And Dr. Harden, as a matter of fact, when I got a shirt and a hat that says alternate fact, and it says lies in red. That's a part of it. But I'm not too sure if we aren't at a point where we have a cohort of people who have called a system of alternate facts by which they are living to get where they want to go, and they're going to go there come HR high water. They're going to go there. I think they're set. I don't know. For the first time in my life, I've really felt that there may be a cohort of people who they're diseased, as you said, Paul. There is a disease, and the only thing we can do is deal with the system and try to make sure that we get the right people in there. I don't know, I'm rambling on, but it's disheartening. It's disheartening.
Okay, if I may, this is Princess. I apologize for not being on camera. And hello to Paul and Kesha. I appreciated your comments. This has been a wonderful dialogue. In addressing what Dr. Hardin just mentioned about facts and what Dr. Westenberg mentioned about alternative facts, I think with some of the comments that we hear in the media and from different groups, they don't necessarily believe what they're saying. I think one of our major charges, as activists, people trying to make the world a better place, is to not get distracted by those comments and not to spend big chunks of time trying to convince people who are saying certain things that may not be helpful in terms of healing or a decrease in polarization or anything else, hateful comments, to the point where we're distracted, where we're not doing our work. One of the major functions of disinformation and maybe targeting certain groups, et cetera, is to have those of goodwill be distracted and running after the shiny object. So, with our respective faiths, our respective philosophies, however we want to frame that, we want to always be respectful. It's important to speak from a, open mind and an open heart, so to speak. But we don't want to get distracted to the point where we're neglecting what we need to do and leaving those who are the most vulnerable in our society more vulnerable, taking our eyes off the ball.
Okay. Dr. Westenberg, can you see the hands okay? I mean, you're
Okay, I do now.
I can help. I can help if you want. Thank you, Princess. That was important. It's like for us not to get distracted. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I can jump in really quick, and I want to thank the NAACP, and I know a lot of people here, and it's wonderful to see Dr. Westenberg, who you might not remember me, but I remember you because you showed up in August at the Scottsdale Baha'i Center where we had a voting rights sort of event, and there was that panel, and it was wonderful. So it's nice to see you, because many times we've been like, where is she? What was her name? Where is she? Anyway, so it's nice to see you. I was going to say regarding, well, I've had many thoughts. I really appreciate our two panelists. So sometimes I think the extreme polarization that is pounded down our throats through the media, but we also see, like on my street, there is a gentleman. He's an electrical engineer. He is a openly QAnon person who will easily try to divert the conversation into things that are based on hate, disunity, non-facts, things like that. So when I'm talking with him, I really kind of have to be careful in how I navigate so our conversation remains civil and all of that. But sometimes I think that because of what I perceive to be like the disintegration of a lot of institutions in the society, that perhaps it's based on a collective humanity just for years, generations, not addressing the certain ills like racism, gender inequality, things like that. Things are eroding, from the school district to, being able to afford to live. And of course, I'm talking in a US context right now. I'm not even thinking globally. I think there's a lot of tension and agitation, and it sort of leaves the brain somewhat like cognitively vulnerable to fleeing into spaces that feel safe, and like our caveman fight or flight, us and them sort of thinking, I think has there's a vulnerability to that being exacerbated, and it's exploited. It definitely is exploited by the media and a lot of this noise, because some people are benefiting from this, perhaps based on sources of power that they've historically had and they want to retain and all of that. But I want to say that at the same time, just in the last couple of years, I have been so, I don't want to say surprised, but really encouraged by the level of collaboration that I am seeing, being a part of, from groups that all share very similar visions and desires for society to be just and fair and this beloved community. And for example, I'll just share briefly, and it takes a little, well, on my part, it takes a little bit of courage, which I think Kesha had mentioned, we have to have some bravery to us. So for example, just now, I'm part of a group that's planning this film festival for Black History Month. And we were collaborating with the NAACP and Project Humanities at ASU and some other groups. But I thought to myself, I've attended a couple of events at the Humanists of Greater Phoenix, which is a group of people who I think identify as atheist / sometimes agnostic and very science-based, but beautiful. They do wonderful work. I mean, they host these events where they are creating out of plastic garbage bags. They braid them to create mattresses so people who are unhoused can have something to lay on versus just the cold sidewalk and things. Granted, not the final solution, but it's something. So and so I reached out to them about this festival, and so it's being fundamentally sponsored by a faith community, the Baha'i Faith in Scottsdale, in conjunction with all our wonderful partners, including Arizona Faith. And I was a little bit like, how are they going to receive this? Because they are they're atheist, agnostic. They were so embracing. They're like, oh yeah, we'll put this out on our website. We'll do all because the end goal that we're all striving for is very similar. And so I think going back to some of the comments about, I think what Princess was saying, let's not let the noise of this meta narrative pounding on us, which doesn't really have to reflect my reality, but if I consume it all the time, I get convinced it does. But let's not let that distract us from all the opportunity to work together. And I'm just saying that I have been experiencing that by just sort of putting myself out there a little more, taking some, I don't know if they're risks, but just having a little more courage to reach out. It's really rendering fruit. It's affirming to me, there are so many people who want the beloved community. And yes, we all might have different origins from where that impetus is coming. Different faiths, different maybe belief systems, but the vision is the same. And if we can connect and work together, then that becomes a very strong counter movement to this blah, 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 that, and I'm so appreciative of having a teenager in my house, because he often is like, why do you have that news on again, Mom? I feel like his generation is very, very rejecting of this, sort of media narration trying to shove down our throats. And I'm not saying that some of the behaviors and outcomes aren't real, because they are, but it reminds me, I have a choice. I have a choice of where I can emphasize and put my efforts. And I don't just have to sit on the couch listening to all this stuff and then maybe not even realizing I'm sort of digesting and becoming part of that dichotomy. I have rambled.
Sheila, you brought something to mind, and it may have been mentioned today, but social media has had a tremendous impact on where we are and what worlds and spheres we go into. It can be a rabbit hole. We can go into certain little niches and get caught up in there. And we don't, well, here I am. And where are you all? I don't know. Some faces, some not. What are you wearing? You may be in your pajamas. Who knows? I mean, you know, the way that we interface with each other has changed tremendously. And so what's fed into us is so diverse too. Some people may not have ever had the opportunity to be exposed to some things because something else hit them first before we got to them. And social media has been a blessing, but it has also been a curse. I think that's part of the problem as well. Other comments, questions? Yes, John.
Yes, good morning, everyone, and I'm enjoying the discussion. And it, where we are right now, reminded me of a book I have on my library, and I went and got it. It's called A Testament of Hope, The Essential Writings and Speeches of Martin Luther King. And in it, he talks about the ethical demands of integration. And I want to read a couple of things that he said. He said, the problem of race and color prejudice remains America's greatest moral dilemma, all right? Then he says, regarding integration being the ultimate goal, the word segregation represents a system that is prohibitive. It denies the Negro equal access to schools, parks, restaurants, libraries, and the like. Desegregation is eliminative and negative, for it simply removes these legal and social prohibitions. Integration is creative and is therefore more profound and far-reaching than desegregation. Integration is the positive acceptance of desegregation and the welcomed participation of Negroes into the total range of human activities. Integration is a force and a movement that Dr. King in the last years of his life was speaking of, and it, to me, puts together this idea of the beloved community. It's integrated. So looking at Maricopa County as a legally desegregated community, but it's certainly not an integrated community, is something that is, you know, if it's, everyone will agree that that's a fact, that begins to give us a basis on which to operate. I liked very much what Kesha said about the crisis that we have today. The homelessness crisis, these are other fellow human beings, gives us the opportunity to work toward, to me, an integrative approach to serving our community. I just want to throw that out, that the homelessness crisis, and you know, Karen, I talked to you about that a couple of weeks ago. That was my, even though I knew it was the hardest thing, I said that that's the most important thing that I think we're dealing with here. But it can be a process by which it can help to integrate our varying communities that are segregated, you know, de jure, not de jure anymore, but de facto, but having something to work together on. And I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Integration, he says.
Yeah, I like that idea of, you know, when we always talk about segregation, desegregation, and then it's like the integration is what we should be working toward, similar to Paul, when you were talking about assimilation, right? Assimilation versus pluralism, right? Assimilation is the ideal of, we will let you foreigners or you differents, those of you that are different, if you assimilate to what are our norm, then we'll accept you, rather than the pluralism. I'm
Yeah,
equating
that's like
pluralism,
tolerance versus
pluralistic
like
and integration the same, right? It's like, no, we'll accept you as you are without you having to change. Yeah, so great.
Yes, Willie or Sheila, I see your hand. You're on mute.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for this discussion. Very much. I really appreciate it. I'm learning a lot as we go. It's also firing up some old thoughts that I had. I first wanted to say, Paul Harasha, you are a sociologist. I did not know that. I served with you on a panel discussion a couple months ago. And if I had known that, you and I would have had a conversation a long time ago. So you and I are going to lunch fairly soon. So I just wanted to point that out. And the one thing that you had mentioned about being a leader, I had worked with children for teens for about 40 years. And the one thing that I always told them, especially the ones that were kind of quiet, was that there is a strong leader in all of you. You just need to step up and see what type of leader you want to become. And the one example that I use, because it was in mostly urban communities, was Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and how they both took a different stance as a leader, but they got their point across. That was the one piece that I wanted to mention to you. And Kesha, I wanted to thank you so much, because you are the first attorney that I ever met in my life that has a balance of both real life and attorney skills. So I really appreciate that. And I'm enamored by you because of the way that you presented that information. You talked about advocacy and how important that is. That is hugely important. And I don't think that people understand that there's an advocate in all of us. We just have to figure out at what point do we get fired up to support that idea. And so I wanted to say thank you to the both of you, and thank you to the NAACP for putting this on. So that was it.
Great. And Dr. Westenberg, before I kick it back to you, I'd like to just remind folks that folks, that's what we say back in Missouri, okay? I'd like to remind everyone that every fourth Saturday at 11:30, we have our community discussions. And if you're, and we also send out weekly updates. I think most everyone on the call is on our listserv. And if you're not getting a update of what we're doing, our branch is doing, usually comes out Sunday mornings, please let us know. And also watch your spam, because the email is Maricopa, I think it's Maricopa NAACP. So please watch those weekly updates. Join us at any time. It's standard 11:30, the fourth Saturday, and we'll be back, a month from now, fourth Saturday in February. Also, the film, our film festival that we're joining, the Baha'i is putting it on, and some of us will be facilitating. Though that information is on our listserv, so please, there's a film almost every weekend, at least Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So please watch our updates and join those conversations as well. And my favorite, Lawrence O'Donnell says, who has the last word? I'm going to say, from my point of view, Princess has the last word to say, don't let the shiny noise, I'm paraphrasing her, because she said it a little more eloquently than I'm going to say it, but let us here not let the shiny noise, the shiny object or the noise deter us from keep working toward the beloved community. So I'll turn it back to you, Dr. Westenberg.
Well, thank you so very much, everyone. panelists, thank you as well. Your comments have led us into various directions and ways of knowing where we are and where we have to go. There are two quotes that I would like to share from Dr. King. One is, change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle. And the other is, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. And so from my perspective, I thank each of you for being a part of the struggle. We are all there because we know what things matter and we are not being silent. So yes, let's make some noise. Thank you, Dr. Harden.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.